Wow, this place looks awfully familiar from the last time I recall being in this place. But on that note, folks, good evening, WNBA and LA Sparks fans, and welcome to the LA Sparks 365 Network, your 24/7 365 comprehensive home of the WNBA and your two-time WNBA champion, Los Angeles Sparks, fresh off vacation to the Hawaiian Islands. Good evening, everybody, alongside Chris Woodmansey at the Internet Heart Studios up in Anaheim, California. The familiar face over here, Cal McClure, joining you folks here back in Studio 171 here in America's finest city. Chris, good evening. It's been 2 weeks, man, since we've been on the air last time. We missed out on a lot of great games, a few ugly games, and saw the Sparks clinch their 14th WNBA postseason berth in the 18th history of the franchise. Other than that, how's the vacation time / off time been?
Just hanging here, looking for a job, but just keeping my fingers crossed. What I got an email thanks to you, and I'm just keep my fingers crossed.
Folks, again, if you forgot here that we were on vacation basically from July 31st all the way till now, we did come your way live for 1 day over in Hawaii. As you can tell, though, the internet was not the best at my hotel, so that's why we kind of stopped doing the shows from the hotel because the Wi-Fi was not very nice over there. So we just waited to come back to the mainland and get some stable internet, but we are here, though, in any case here, live on the LA Sparks 365 network. Chris, before we get to the regular season discussion, of course, man, we know that with the vacation time that we missed a lot of those great games and stuff. But Chris, tonight, though, with today being the last day of the regular season, of course, we did have to throw a lot of thank yous out to a lot of great people that really, Chris, have made this network, work. I mean, we came on here in February, 2 weeks after the Sparks were bought by Magic Johnson and the Dodgers ownership group. And along the way, Chris, we've had a lot of great things happen, everything from the articles we were in over the offseason about the petition efforts, everything else included, to basically being, with basically almost every WNBA fan following us on our Twitter page. We launched our website. At least I was interviewed during off the network back in last month. I know at least I've been to 2 games already this season. We've had a lot of great people follow us on Twitter, from a lot of the WNBA writers, people that really just appreciated our hard work during the entire season. And of course, Chris, we've been viewed, of course, by former Sparks player, now member of the Connecticut Sun, Ebony Hoffman, and the man himself, Coach Dave Miller. Chris, so far, looking back at everything before the season, with everything that happened over the offseason, and sort of, Chris, your thoughts about how far we've come here in 6 months since we launched back in February of this year.
Just very awesome when we come back. Just launches back in February. Already a lot of followers on the Twitter network, and a lot of people love this network.
Chris, of course, obviously the network would thank us too first because, we're on here every night doing our best to get everyone involved here. Of course, that's why we've kind of been voted the best online broadcast team and everything else included. And of course, Chris, you're naturally going to thank everyone that, is here on a day-to-day basis, like yourself, myself, and our sort of off-the-wall hit-and-miss substitutes that come in and help out, which is Shorty Mamba 24 and Crystal Thomas on Twitter. And of course, you got to thank the fans, of course, everything else included. So, Chris, we're going to say it here, but we actually want to thank the fans out there more so in person that have been able to, for one, Chris, embrace this network for one, and at the same time, that they're realizing that we're not just here for the Sparks, we're for the whole league. And Chris, this might be the only place you'll probably ever hear any WNBA talk, because you won't hear it anytime soon on ESPN, Fox Sports 1, and your local newspaper. So this is like the only real place, Chris, you can come to and be in WNBA heaven, basically.
Yep, agree.
So, Chris, with that, we'll get to the obvious, dubious task here of trying to put a bow on what was a very, very roller coaster / rocky road / inconsistent 2014 LA Sparks regular season. We're gonna just, Chris, we're gonna go through the entire year, sort of look back at some games that stick out to us, talk to them for a bit, and then, by the way, folks, if you did not see our schedule, I know we came on here a bit late because we are fixing a few things. Chris was finishing up some stuff at his house, and of course, with me getting back on packed time here, of course, because right now it's only 6 o'clock back over in Hawaii, so I'm trying to get back and recuperated here to the Pacific time zone. So we will have the regular season recap. Then coming up after this, we'll have our WNBA postseason, our playoff preview show coming up after this. Then at 10 o'clock or after 10 o'clock, or maybe at 10:30 perhaps, we're gonna go to the two-man show of record, folks, the guys with the petition, to talk about our off-season programming. Because Chris, we've got a few good ideas, and I can't wait to really crack these open to the fans. And Chris, for the hell of it, after that, we're gonna do a late-night edition of the #1 show. Chris, we're gonna do Sparks Fam later on this evening. But Chris, to the task at hand before we get to the regular season. A reminder, folks, that the Sparks, with their win on Tuesday over the Lynx in Minneapolis, the Sparks have clinched a record-setting 14th postseason playoff appearance. The playoff tickets are on sale for the best-of-3 WNBA Western Conference semifinal series, which start at $12. The series will begin on Friday in Phoenix. The Sparks will take on the longtime rival Phoenix Mercury in that 3-game series. You guys can purchase your playoff tickets that start as low as $12 right now by calling 877-44-SPARKS, 877-44-SPARKS, or online at lasparks.com. Again, we will get to the playoff schedule momentarily. But Chris, to know that stat real quick, though, this is the 14th time in 18 years that the Sparks won in the postseason, man. You think it's you think of some of the greatest, some of the great franchises out there like the Yankees, the Lakers, the Celtics, teams that are normally every other year in the postseason, and the Sparks here, Chris, with this record, I'll tell you what, man. But between the Sparks having the longest winning streak and the most wins in league history, 14 postseason appearances, Chris, I don't think is going to be matched by anybody anytime soon.
Yep.
So again, folks, the Sparks and the Mercury in the Western Conference semifinals. Series begins on Friday at the U.S. Airways Center. By the way, the game time, folks, for Sunday's game on August 24th will be at 6 o'clock p.m. at Staples Center in downtown Los Angeles. And Chris, it took the Sparks all the way till the third to last game of the regular season to clinch their postseason berth, man. And we're going to go through Chris, through a few games here. Not all the games, because it would take us like an hour or so to get through every single game. We're going to talk about a few games, though, that kind of stick out to our mind, Chris. And we'll go all the way back to May, when the season first started, Chris, with everyone having championship hopes. Chris, I think when we look at May, okay, the only 3 games they played that really counted, the Seattle game to start the year was sort of a positive point, because I believe after that, or at least after the 25th of May, the Sparks were over 500, Chris, after May 25th. And if we kind of look back, okay, you beat Seattle, you would go on to beat them 4 more times. But Chris, again, I think the crucial game that sticks out, though, is not because it was my birthday game, but Chris, they played the Mercury once that game. And like I was telling a few people, which was Christian and Cecil last night, Chris, is what has been the thing for me with the Sparks playing Phoenix, and this is kind of like a little playoff preview too here, Chris, is the Sparks just seem to dig themselves a big ditch. They put themselves in that 5 to 7 to double-digit deficit like that, and then you're trying to rally back like last night, and you can't get it done, Chris. If I have to go to a game that sticks out in my mind, obviously it's going to be the first home game of the year, because for one, it was your longtime rivals, and two, again, you dig yourself that big ditch early in that first quarter, and you couldn't claw your way all the way out of it.
Yeah, pretty much. It seems like this whole season, the Sparks digging a big ditch and try to crawl away back game. Pretty much, if they didn't do it pretty much the whole season, probably would have Premier League at least at 20 wins, probably.
20 wins, perhaps. You never know. So Chris, the Sparks would finish May 2-1. They would go on to stop the San Antonio Stars on May 25th, 83-62. Then Chris, as we go to June, man, there's a lot of games, and then there's that one stretch I think that has sort of been the turning point of the year. But first, Chris, we'll get to what I think is still one of the best games of the year, Chris, that put us all in our beds for a nap back on June 1st, Chris, that 92-84 loss, yes, but it was that triple overtime game, though, in Washington, D.C., Chris, that, again, was, decided at the free throw line about, yes, Candace Parker clanking the free throw, and then Ivory Lata's, Harlem Globetrotters, three-ring circus three-pointer to tie the game in the first OT. She ties game up at the line in the second overtime, and then, the Sparks just went out of gas, in that third overtime period. Chris, regardless of that loss, though, man, 3 overtimes is the record played for overtime periods by the Sparks in their franchise history, Chris. And honestly, man, it could have gone either way, but a missed here, the circus three-pointer, Chris. That game still, though, is an instant classic, I think, for the whole season, regardless of the outcome of that game.
Yep, agree.
A true test of endurance in that triple overtime game. Then, Chris, the one we're also going to go to here for June, Chris, is how the Sparks completely stomped the Chicago Sky at Allstate Arena, Chris, and they pretty much just sledgehammered them 102-88. Chris, and I think that is probably the best all-around 40 minutes that the Sparks have played all season, I think. They had everyone was clicking, and they took advantage, Chris, of Chicago, who had EDD at that time, Chris, but it just seemed like the Sparks came out there and just, put the Sky in the LA ditch early in that game, a big lead early, and they didn't let up at all. And again, man, that might be that's probably the best game that they played all season, perhaps, for a combined 40-minute effort, I think.
Yeah, but I think that was the turning point after Chicago Sky falling down to earth.
Yeah, I agree. I just, that's what it seems like, I think, ever since then. Then, of course, Chris, then there was the earthquake slide. That was, it was after that big win in Chicago, Chris, where it was those 4 straight losses. Minnesota twice at home, Tulsa, and then Chris the Sparks get sledgehammered. They get pummeled by the Stars in San Antonio. Chris, the first one we're going to get to, of course, is the Tulsa Shock game, Chris, that went like this all the way back and forth, and it's a Diggins runner in the lane with 1 second with a second left to play in the game that gives the Shock the victory. And then, of course, and then the Sparks get completely shut down in San Antonio. And then for the hell of it, they get blown out at home by the Minnesota Lynx, 94-77. Where I think that probably was the downfall when we reported back last month about the firing of Carol Ross. One of those 2 games in Minnesota, Chris, was the game where Candace Parker just went completely off on assistant coach Gail Gustenkors. And Chris, I think that 4-game skid, those also the turning point of the year as well, because 4 consecutive losses. 2 of them to a team that you kind of figured you'd have problems with, but 2 losses, Chris, I think were very unacceptable though to the Shock and the Stars.
Yep. Unacceptable.
Very tough 4-game stretch there. Then as we go towards the later part, Chris, again, the Stars team, Chris, just did not go away with us with LA, Chris. It was LA trailing by 1 at home on June 22nd, Chris, and then Danielle Robinson with the runner to put the Stars up by 3. That was pretty much the ball game after that point in time. As soon as that layup was made, then the Sparks got back on track with those 2 wins over the Storm and the Shock in Tulsa. And then as we go towards June, Chris, it seemed like the Sparks turned a corner when they went on that 4-game road trip. Okay. Sure, they lost to Minnesota again. We kind of expected that to happen. I know you did as well. But, Chris, then the 3 straight wins for LA over New York at MSG, then the domination of the Sun in Connecticut, and then I think their other best ever, Chris, was rallying back in Indiana down by 13 at the half. They came back, won that game by 10. Candace Parker had her best game of the year that night, Chris. And I think that 3-game winning streak sort of put them back in a good spot and back in that groove until they came back home again, Chris, which basically sort of a role reversal from last year, how the road was their house of horrors. Yeah, Staples Center became a house of horrors, Chris. But your thoughts, though, about the Sparks going on the road, though, and taking 3 out of 4 on that long 4-game road trip through Minnesota, New York, and Indiana?
I think it was a great road trip, taking 3 out of 4 to get the Sparks on a roll and throughout the season and carrying them into to a long playoffs this time.
We hope so. And then, Chris, as we said, okay, 3 straight wins, Chris. 3 straight losses after that. All 3, Chris, at home. Washington was a close game that went down to the wire, but Sparks lost by 4. And then it seems like I'm the bad luck charm, so I better not go to the playoff game like I have been thinking about on Sunday, because the Sparks also lost to New York 66-64 in a game that they also own, Chris. But that was a very sloppy game, Chris, on both parts. There were way too many missed layups in that contest between those two teams. And it came down to Kristi Toliver having a shot to win the game. Her three-pointer came up short, and J-Lab's putback was after the horn sounded. Then, of course, pure domination. The Sparks get torched by 20 at home against Phoenix. And then Chris, again, 3 straight losses at home, Chris. Then they followed up with 2 more wins again over the Storm once more in Seattle. And then, Chris, in a game that made me sweat before I went on vacation against Indiana, that came down again, Chris, to the Fever. Again, imploding late, the Sparks, without Parker that night, won the contest 77-73. And then, of course, Chris, when I go on vacation, they get absolutely mauled again by the Mercury to round out July 90-69. And then, Chris, while I'm on vacation earlier a few weeks ago, Chris, in a game that I believe everybody still is high-stepping about, talking about, laughing and crying about, Chris, is the improbable, immaculate 5-point comeback in the last 30 seconds that blew up my IG account with 55 likes on the photo. Kristi Toliver drains the game-winning 3 with 9.5 to play. The Sparks cap a 5-0 run in 23 seconds to beat the Connecticut Sun at home, 70-69. Chris, I believe regardless of what anyone says about Kristi Toliver leaving in the season, she saved her best for last. And it was in true KT fashion.
Yep. And I just hope KT could keep draining those threes in the playoffs. Not like
yeah, we need her, and we will get to that in a few minutes here on our postseason or on our playoff preview show. In case anyone is wondering, we know that Crystal Thomas high step at Staples, folks. I think I won up to her, and I think I won the title of high step champion. I did mine all the way from the beach to the water and jumped in head first to celebrate the game-winning 3. Then, Chris, a chance to the first chance LA had to clinch that playoff spot was against Tulsa, Chris, and the Sparks again got down early in that game. They rallied back, but honestly, since put them away, the Sparks lose by 6. And then, Chris, in another great game this year, which salvaged the series split with Atlanta this year, Chris, that also came down to a exhausting overtime situation. And once again, it's that girl, Kristi Toliver, again with a big 3 to put the Sparks ahead by 3. And, Chris, the real Showtime team was a little too much for Shoney Showtime Schimmel to win that game or at least tie the game at the buzzer, Chris. And I'll tell you what, I can only imagine, Chris, what Michael Cooper was thinking after that game ended in the locker room at Staples Center when his team lost by 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was like, what just happened kind of, I guess, but the Sparks won that game. Then, Chris, the Sparks had a chance again to clinch that playoff berth again in San Antonio. Couldn't do it there. And, Chris, the last place I ever would have thought this struggling LA team would have clinched the postseason berth was their other house of horrors, which is the Target Center in Minneapolis, Minnesota, Chris. And the Sparks shocked everybody but you and T-Wow. They came back in the fourth quarter and won the game 71-63 over the Minnesota Lynx to clinch their 14th postseason playoff berth. Chris, honestly, Target Center was the last place on my list of arenas I thought the Sparks would clinch. I thought they would clinch at home or clinch, Chris, anywhere but Minneapolis, Chris. And finally, Chris, it's another fourth quarter comeback that they capped off to win that contest. And then, of course, Chris, just for good measure, they will once again beat the Seattle Storm and clean sweep Seattle in the 5-game series at home. And then, of course, Chris, yesterday, an interesting one again, lost to the Phoenix Mercury for the 5th straight time this season. So, Chris, out of all the games we just talked about, man, what is your #1 favorite game from the 2014 regular season and why?
I think that thing that's still has me high stepping, going crazy. When I think I just got done with my girlfriend, I think I was talking to her and she saw me going crazy and she said, why? Because this game got me going crazy and still high stepping, and then the game come back calling it, saying Sparks will beat Minnesota in Minnesota.
You know, I'm sure you folks would think I would go to like obvious choices of either May 18th or July 23rd. For one, folks, looking around this, Chris, I'm actually going to go to the game against Atlanta first. I mean, Atlanta was a game, Chris, that I think the Sparks sort of had to, save their season basically that game. And for one, I mean, they had that, for one, Chris, okay, now the Sparks had a big lead here. They coughed it up, Chris, and they had to go to overtime to win it. And it was a game, Chris, that pretty much, kept me on the edge of my sofa in my hotel room because I was watching the game. Thanks a lot to the TWC Sportsnet app on my phone here. And it was a game, Chris, that really had me on edge because every time LA would get ahead by 5, there's Shoni Schimmel, Chris, making a 3-pointer to make it down to a 2 or 1 point game. And it was a game that really, really, kept everyone on edge. And then I will say the Connecticut game, Chris, because I had just gotten to the beach and flipped on the game on Sportsnet on my phone right as the last possession when that 5-point comeback started. And literally, to my credit again, seeing the shot made, open the door, throw my phone on the chair, on the seat, and high step from the parking lot out to the water and jump in to celebrate the game-winning 3. And then, Chris, I got to go to the game where the Sparks unfortunately lost to New York because I finally got to meet Candace Parker in person for the first time in, God knows how long, basically. And I'll say this as well. I mean, I got to go there again and see. One of my other favorite teams in the league, but again, it was more so about seeing Parker play. So I got to go Atlanta, Connecticut, and seeing the Liberty play, and of course meeting the original CP3 of LA, which is Candace Parker. We want to get your take, though, folks, on Twitter. Send it into at LASparks265, at CalamaC3, or at LASparksFan30. Let us know what is your favorite game of the 2014 season. Let us know on Twitter with the hashtag favorite Sparks game of 2014, or you can just make your own hashtag basically. But again, let us know your favorite game of the season and why. You can just let us know and just say my favorite game of the year was blah blah blah, so on and so forth. Chris, again, there's been a lot going on, in a year that's has not sort of gone to plan for the Sparks. We know that it's been a very long season, and it's had to lead to a coaching firing and a lot of other things going on, man. And I mean, this was Chris, in my view, this is sort of like this is like a freebie basically because like we'll say a lot, Chris, or like we have said a lot at least, man, is this is the year that could not have been for the Sparks in the WNBA because if the Sparks would have folded or left, so on and so forth, man. So I'm going to give the team, Chris, a free pass this year because there was, a new ownership coming in. There was high expectations, like there always is with this team. But Chris, I'm not really like frustrated or upset or sad about the season. That it might end perhaps, if I go to Game 2 on Sunday at Staples Center against the Mercury. But Chris, during the season, there was, really like no expectations, of the Sparks getting into the postseason this year because of how bad they're playing. So I'm gonna be kind of like Will Smith on Fresh Prince, like Will Smith on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, dude. I ain't even mad if the season ends on Sunday and I'm at the game.
Yeah.
I mean, Chris, there's a lot that's happened. I mean, and Chris, if it's to the point too where Lynx fans like Rashad Jackson are sort of going, how is this happening to the LA Sparks? That's something that sticks out in my mind too is. Not only were us fans concerned about the team, but so were other people as well. Because Chris, even Chris, I know we talk a lot about how good the fan base is. Chris, they're smart enough, Chris, to realize the potential of the Sparks. And I think, Chris, I think though that probably, man, that other fans that were sort of like shocked, like we were, and sort of stunned, but at the same time, they were smart enough to know though that this team is built to be a contender for, you know, forever, basically, because they're always going to be up there. But Chris, it's to the point in time though where other fans that were like, how is this happening to this team? I mean, that's sort of what sticks out in my mind too. And again, that's why I'm kind of giving them a free pass too, because again, man, you know, I mean, you know, without Magic, man, we're not sitting here right now talking about the regular season or even the postseason right now for the league or for the Sparks in general.
Yep, agree. Or we could be talking about the Sparks, but it could have been a different name.
Yeah, the Bay Area Breakers probably. It would have been Breakers 365 here, perhaps, folks, for all that we know. But thank you a lot, Mr. Magic Johnson. Again, folks, a reminder, the 2014 WNBA playoffs get underway on the 21st. The Sparks take on the longtime rival Phoenix Mercury in the Western Conference semifinals. Game 2 will be Sunday, August 24th at 6 p.m. at Staples Center. Tickets are on sale now, so get yours right now at 9:42 p.m. Pacific Time by calling 844-GO-SPARKS, 844-GOSPARKS, or log on to lasparks.com for more information. Sparks playoff basketball, you gotta believe in Sparks Magic. Chris, before we get out of here and get ready to go on to our WNBA preseason or postseason finals preview here, man, your final lasting thoughts on a very, very turbulent, rough, and a lot of, and just, you know, one that is looking, Chris, for that Hollywood ending of the Sparks winning the 2014 title this year. Your lasting thoughts on what was a very, very rocky 2014 WNBA regular season for the Los Angeles Sparks coming off the ownership change.
Just gonna be an irony, barring because of what just happened in application Disneyland, but a roller coaster season, going up and down, and made the playoffs on the last day in Minnesota. Just hope we could keep it rolling, just like the Indiana Fever did. Was terrible in the regular season and kept up with a championship.
Chris, my lasting thoughts here again is sort of like you again, you know, that crazy, out of control roller coaster going all over the place. Lasting thoughts again is, you know, a lot, you know, some sloppy play in through every game so far. There's been a lot going on, of course, with what's occurred, as we know, with everything included with the ownership change, and just a year, Chris, that I think a year, Chris, that the Sparks probably are going to forget sometime very soon, because this might be like one of the, like, Chris, you know, this could be like one of the, you know, one of the worst years perhaps, you know, in franchise history outside of the first 3 years in league history. Maybe 2010 when the team, you know, or maybe 07 when the team won 10 games and got Candace Parker in the draft, and the next season, or the 2010 season where Parker was out with her meniscus injury. You know, it's interesting to see what happens. So, I mean, like we all say, man, everyone's records reset to 0-0, and anything happens in the postseason. So that's my lasting thoughts. With that, folks, we'll take our first time out of the night when we come back. We've got ourselves the 2014 WNBA playoff preview show coming up next right here on the LA Sparks 365. So whatever you do, don't go away. More to come after this.